The Puppet Theater. Chapter 1, The Village Beneath the Fog. The fog was Rochefort's jailer, a suffocating gray shroud that clung to the village like a curse woven into its very stones. Anna guided the horse-drawn cart through its damp coils, the wheels grinding over slick cobblestones, the sound swallowed by the mist's oppressive silence. Her son, Lucien, sat beside her, his scarf pulled tight against the chill, his breath fogging the air in shallow puffs. At 10, his hazel eyes were too large for his gaunt face, catching every shadow in the narrow, winding streets. Rochefort's houses leaned inward, their shutters nailed shut, their chimneys cold, as if the village had exhaled its last breath decades ago. Eyes seemed to watch from behind curtains, fleeting and furtive, but no one emerged to greet the newcomers. At the edge of the village square, their new home loomed, a decaying manor of blackened stone and warped timber, its eaves sagging like a mourner's shoulders, its windows dark as voids, reflecting nothing but the fog. Across the street, the ruins of an old theater crouched, its charred beams clawing at the mist, its facade a skull with broken teeth, its doors sealed like a tomb, the air around it heavier, as if it exhaled its own malevolence. "It's creepy," Lucien whispered, his voice trembling, his small hands clutching the cart's edge, his knuckles pale. "It's like the world's dead, Mama. Why did we come here?" Anna forced a smile, her hands tight on the reins, her knuckles white beneath her warm gloves, her fingers aching from the cold. "It's just old, sweetheart," she said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her chest. "We'll make it ours. It's a new start." She didn't mention the rent, so cheap it felt like a bribe, or the silence from every other landlord she'd written to. After her husband's death, his gambling debts piling up like vultures, his lies unraveling their lives, his body found in the river with a noose of debts around his neck, the water claiming him as the creditors closed in, this was their last refuge. Rochefort was a forgotten place, tucked in a valley where maps seemed to falter, where the world turned its back. Anna needed to be forgotten too. The city had chewed her up, spat her out, and left her with nothing but Lucien, a suitcase of regrets, and a sewing kit she hadn't touched in months, its needles rusted from disuse. They unloaded their meager belongings by candlelight, the manor's interior a labyrinth of creaking floors, peeling wallpaper, and air thick with mildew and something sharper, like the memory of smoke. Dust hung like a veil, coating Anna's throat, stinging her eyes, settling into her lungs like grief. Lucien darted between rooms, his curiosity a spark in the gloom, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous halls, stirring up clouds of dust that danced in the candlelight. "It's like a castle," he called, his voice bouncing off walls that seemed to absorb it, muting its joy. Anna unpacked chipped plates in the kitchen, her fingers trembling, not from the cold, but from the weight of her failures. She'd been a seamstress once, stitching dreams into dresses for wealthy women, her needle a wand that wove elegance from silk and thread. Now she stitched together a life from scraps, for Lucien's sake, her hands calloused, her dreams frayed, her heart scarred by the memory of her husband's voice, slurred with whiskey, promising they'd be fine even as the world collapsed around them. "Mama!" Lucien's voice rang from upstairs, sharp with excitement, cutting through her thoughts like a knife. "There's something weird up here. You have to see it." Anna climbed the narrow staircase, her lantern casting jagged shadows that danced like specters, their shapes twisting into claws and faces before dissolving into the dark. Lucien stood at the foot of a rickety ladder leading to a trapdoor in the ceiling, his eyes bright with adventure, his curls damp with sweat despite the chill, his scarf slipping to reveal a neck pale as bone. "Can we look in the attic?" he asked, bouncing on his toes, his voice bubbling with a child's thrill, oblivious to the unease curling in Anna's gut. She hesitated, her breath catching, her hand tightening on the lantern's handle. The air felt wrong, heavy with a pressure she couldn't name, like a storm waiting to break, its thunder trapped in her chest. The trapdoor above seemed to pulse, as if breathing, its wood warped, its edges stained with something dark. "Tomorrow," she said, her voice sharper than intended, her hand reaching for his shoulder, pulling him back. "It's late, Lucien. Bed. Now." He pouted, his lower lip trembling, but obeyed, his footsteps dragging as they descended, his scarf trailing behind him like a ghost. That night, Anna lay awake, the fog pressing against the windows like a living thing, its tendrils seeping through cracks she hadn't noticed, curling across the floor like fingers. A faint hum drifted through the house, not the wind, but a melody, warped and thin, like a song played on a broken instrument, its notes drowning in static, twisting in her ears. She crept to Lucien's room, her heart pounding, her bare feet cold on the floorboards, her lantern trembling in her hand. He slept, curls plastered to his forehead, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm too steady for the unease gripping her. The sound was gone, but its echo lingered, a ghost of a tune she couldn't place. She blamed her nerves, the exhaustion of the journey, the ghosts of her past, her husband's voice, his promises, his cold hand in hers before he walked into the river. But as she returned to bed, the darkness felt alive, its silence a predator's pause, watching, waiting, its breath hot on her neck. Chapter 2: The Music Box in the Attic. Morning brought no reprieve from the fog. It clung to Rochefort, swallowing the sun, casting the village in a perpetual half-light that bled color from the world, turning stone to ash, sky to slate. Anna scrubbed the manor's floors, the scent of mildew stinging her nose, her hands raw from the rough sponge, her knees aching against the cold wood. The house resisted her efforts, its grime stubborn, its walls seeming to lean closer with every stroke, as if resenting her presence. Lucien, restless, explored every corner, his laughter a rare warmth in the oppressive gloom, though it sounded fainter each day, as if the manor were stealing it. He darted through rooms, opening cabinets, peering under furniture, his curiosity undimmed by the manor's weight, his small frame a flicker of life against its decay. By noon, he was back at the attic ladder, his eyes gleaming with mischief, his scarf dangling loose, his curls bouncing as he tugged at her sleeve. "Can I go up now?" he pleaded, his voice bright with anticipation, his hands clasped as if in prayer. "Please, Mama. It's like a treasure hunt. There's got to be something amazing up there, like pirate gold or a knight's sword." Anna sighed, wiping sweat from her brow, her muscles aching from hours of cleaning, her back stiff from bending over the floors. The manor's chill seeped into her bones, a cold that no fire could chase away, but Lucien's excitement was a flicker of light she couldn't bear to snuff out, a reminder of the boy he'd been before the city broke them. "Stay where I can see you," she said, her tone softer but still edged with unease, her eyes flicking to the trapdoor above. "And don't touch anything sharp. Promise me, Lucien." He nodded eagerly, scrambling up the ladder before she could change her mind, his boots clattering against the rungs, his scarf catching on a nail. Anna followed, her lantern trembling in her hand, the light casting distorted shadows that seemed to writhe, forming faces and claws before dissolving into the dark. The attic was a mausoleum of forgotten things, cracked mirrors reflecting slivers of their faces, their eyes distorted, their mouths stretched, moth-eaten rugs crumbling underfoot, their patterns faded into smears of red and black, a steamer trunk carved with circus motifs, clowns with hollow eyes, acrobats frozen mid-leap, a ringmaster wielding a whip under a starless sky, his smile too wide, too sharp. The air was thick, heavy with dust and something sour, like burnt hair or old blood, clinging to Anna's throat, making her cough. Lucien knelt before the trunk, prying open its rusted latch with a child's determination, his small hand steady despite the creak of metal, his breath quick with excitement. Inside lay a music box, its lacquered surface gleaming despite the dust, as if polished by unseen hands, its wood dark as midnight, its edges sharp enough to cut. Etched into its surface were scenes of a circus, tense under a moonless night, trapezes swinging over flames, and a lone puppet in a ruffled costume, its painted eyes unnervingly lifelike, as if they followed Anna across the room, their glass surfaces catching the lantern's glow, reflecting it back in a way that made her skin prickle. The puppet sat atop the box, its ruffled collar stained with faint, rusty smudges, its hands posed as if mid-bow, its smile a crescent of painted teeth, too perfect, too still. "It's so cool," Lucien said, lifting the box with reverence, his fingers tracing its carvings, his eyes wide with wonder. He turned its crank, and a melody spilled out, slow, off-key, like a scream stretched thin over broken strings, each note twisting in the air like a living thing, coiling around Anna's heart. The puppet's head twitched, its eyes blinking, or so she thought, her breath catching in her throat, her hand tightening on the lantern. The attic grew colder, the shadows sharper, as if the room itself were holding its breath, its walls leaning in to listen. Her skin crawled, a cold sweat beating on her neck, her pulse hammering in her ears. "Put it back," she said, her voice tight with a fear she couldn't name, her hand reaching out as if to snatch it away. The melody seemed to coil around her, tightening like a noose, its notes burrowing into her thoughts, whispering something she couldn't understand. "But it's mine now," Lucien protested, clutching the box to his chest, his eyes flashing with defiance, his voice sharper than usual. "Finders keepers, Mama. It's like it was waiting for me, like it chose me." Anna relented, reasoning it was just a child's toy, a relic of some long-dead tenant who'd loved circuses, perhaps a performer who'd lived in the manor before it fell to ruin. But as they descended the ladder, the melody lingered in her ears, dissonant and wrong, like a warning whispered in a language she couldn't understand, its echo following her down the stairs. She glanced back at the trapdoor, half expecting to see those glass eyes staring down, their gaze heavy with intent. That night, she woke to the same tune, faint but unmistakable, drifting from Lucien's room. She crept down the hall, her bare feet cold on the floorboards, her lantern trembling, its light flickering as if afraid. The music box sat on his bedside table, its crank still, yet the melody played on, a warped lullaby that made her stomach churn, its notes twisting into her thoughts like thorns. Lucien slept, his face peaceful, but his fingers twitched, as if turning an invisible crank, his lips moving silently, forming words she couldn't hear. Anna locked the box in a kitchen drawer, her hands shaking, the key heavy in her palm, its metal biting into her skin. The house fell silent, but the silence felt like a predator waiting to pounce, its claws already brushing her spine. By morning, the drawer was empty. The music box sat on the kitchen table, its lid open, the puppet's eyes staring directly at her, its smile a hair wider than she remembered. A faint giggle echoed from the attic, high and sharp, like glass chipping under a hammer, fading into the fog outside. Chapter 3, The Puppet That Speaks. Lucien became inseparable from the music box, carrying it everywhere, humming its warped tune as he wandered the manor's dim halls, his footsteps echoing in a rhythm that matched its notes. Anna caught him whispering to it, his voice low and secretive, as if sharing confidences with an unseen friend, his words too soft to catch but their cadence wrong, a chant that didn't belong to a child. One morning, as she kneaded dough in the kitchen, the scent of flour grounding her against the manor's oppressive weight. She watched him sit cross-legged on the floor, the box in his lap, his fingers tracing its carvings with a reverence that chilled her, his eyes distant, almost vacant. "What are you saying to it?" she asked, dusting flour from her hands, her tone light but her heart racing, her pulse a drumbeat in her ears. The air felt thick, as if the house were listening, its walls leaning closer, its shadows pooling at her feet. He looked up, his eyes unnaturally bright, like polished glass catching a flame, their hazel depths clouded with something foreign. "Pierrot talks to me," he said, his voice soft but steady, his lips curling into a smile that wasn't his. "He's my friend. Pierrot." Anna forced a laugh, though her pulse hammered, her hands trembling as she gripped the counter. "You're quite the storyteller, Lucien. Toys don't talk. You know that, sweetheart." "He's real," he insisted, turning the crank, his fingers steady despite the tremor in his voice. The melody rasped, like a blade scraping bone, each note twisting in her ears, burrowing into her thoughts, making her head ache. "He says he was in the theater across the street. Before it burned. He was a star, Mama, the best performer they ever had." Anna's hands froze in the dough, flour dusting the counter like ash, her breath catching in her throat. She'd overheard whispers in the village market, tales of a fire that gutted the theater 50 years ago, killing an entire troupe, their screams echoing through the valley long after the flames died. The villagers spoke in hushed tones, their eyes darting, as if the story itself were a curse that could summon something dark. No one lingered near the theater's ruins, and children were forbidden to play there, though no one explained why, their warnings sharp and final. The market women had glanced at Anna, their gazes heavy with pity or suspicion, as if she'd brought trouble by moving into the manor, as if her presence had stirred something long dormant. "Don't make things up," she said, her voice sharper than intended, her hands trembling as she wiped them on her apron, flour smearing like chalk. "It's just a toy, Lucien. Stop this nonsense." Lucien's expression darkened, a flicker of defiance crossing his face, his lips twitching into a smile that wasn't his, too wide, too sharp. "He's not a toy," he said, his voice low, almost a growl, his eyes fixed on the puppet, its glass stare reflecting the candlelight. "He's my friend. He needs me." That night, giggles woke her, not Lucien's, but a high, sharp sound, like glass chipping under a hammer, echoing from the attic, its pitch slicing through her dreams. She climbed the ladder, her lantern trembling, the light casting grotesque shadows that seemed to writhe, forming faces and claws before dissolving into the dark. The attic was empty, the air thick with dust and that sour, burnt smell that clung to her throat, making her gag. The music box sat open on the floor, Pierrot's eyes glinting in the dark, as if they'd caught her staring, their gaze heavy with intent. She slammed the lid shut, her breath ragged, and carried it to her room, locking it in a chest under her bed. The key felt cold, almost alive, biting into her palm, its metal leaving a faint red mark. She checked Lucien's room. He slept, but his fingers twitched again, as if turning the crank in his dreams, his lips moving silently, forming words she couldn't hear, their shapes wrong. By morning, the chest was scratched, deep gouges marring its wood-like claw marks, too precise to be random, forming symbols, circles, spirals, a face with no eyes. The music box was back on Lucien's table, its crank slightly turned, the puppet smile wider, its eyes fixed on the door as if waiting for her. Anna's scream caught in her throat, her hands shaking as she backed away, the tune starting again, soft but relentless, like a heartbeat from the grave, its notes curling into her thoughts like smoke. Chapter 4, The Friend Named Pierrot. Lucien named the puppet Pierrot, after the sad clowns in his storybooks, his voice bright with a reverence that made Anna's skin crawl, her heart sinking with every word. He was a circus star, he said one afternoon, sitting in the parlor, twirling the music box's crank, his fingers steady despite the tremor in his shoulders. The tune was slower now, almost mournful, each note dragging like a chain across stone, echoing in the manor's hollow halls, its rhythm a pulse that seemed to sync with her heartbeat. But they burned him, Mama. He wants to perform again, to make the audience clap, to hear their cheers. Anna's stomach twisted, a cold dread settling in her chest like a stone, heavy and unyielding. She knelt beside him, her hands gripping his shoulders, her fingers digging in harder than she meant, her voice trembling, her eyes searching his for the boy she knew. Who told you that, Lucien? Who's putting these ideas in your head? Tell me. Pierrot, he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world, his voice calm but his eyes distant, reflecting the puppet's glassy stare. His smile was wrong, too wide, too sharp, like he was mimicking something not quite human, his teeth glinting in the candlelight. He shows me things at night. The stage, the lights, the fire. The audience screaming, clapping, burning. She watched him closely after that, her heart a constant drumbeat of fear, her eyes never leaving him for long. Lucien spent hours alone, murmuring to the puppet, his voice a soft chant she couldn't decipher, its rhythm unnatural, like a prayer to something dark, its words slithering through the air. At night, the house came alive with sounds, doors creaking, floorboards groaning, whispers slithering through the walls like snakes, their words just beyond her grasp, their tone mocking, hungry. Anna found scratches on the chest where she'd locked the music box, deep gouges that looked like they'd been carved with something sharp and desperate, the wood splintered as if clawed by inhuman hands, the symbols, circles, spirals, eyeless faces, spreading like a disease. She checked the lock, it was intact, yet the box was gone, reappearing in Lucien's hands or on his bed, its tune playing softly, unbidden, like a siren's call, its notes curling into her thoughts, twisting them into knots. Lucien, she said one evening, her voice trembling as she stood in his doorway, the candle in her hand flickering as if afraid, its light casting his face in stark relief, his skin pale, his eyes sunken. No more Pierrot. He's not real. This has to stop, sweetheart. Please. He looked up from the floor, his eyes glinting with something old, something that didn't belong to her son, their hazel depths clouded with a darkness she couldn't name. He's more real than you know, Mama, he said, his voice flat, devoid of the boy she'd raised, his lips curling into a smile that mirrored the puppet's. He needs me. For the show. He says I'm special, the only one who can finish it. Anna tore the music box from his hands, ignoring his scream, a high, keening wail that didn't sound like him, its pitch slicing through her skull. She locked it in a cupboard in the cellar, barricading it with a heavy crate, her hands shaking as she turned the key, its metal biting into her palm. That night, she woke to the tune again, louder, angrier, coming from the cellar, its notes ablaze in her mind. The crate was toppled, the cupboard door ajar, the music box sitting on the floor, its lid open, Pierrot's eyes staring up at her, their gaze heavy with intent. Lucien stood in the shadows, his face pale, his smile a mirror of the puppet's, his hands empty but twitching as if pulling invisible strings. He doesn't like to be locked away, he whispered, his voice layered with another, deeper, colder, its tone a promise of pain. Chapter 5, The Night Games. Lucien changed in ways that carved into Anna's heart like a knife, each shift a wound that bled her dry. His laughter, once a bright thread in their dark days, vanished, replaced by a silence that felt like a void, heavy and suffocating. He stopped playing outside, shunning the village children who knocked timidly at their door, their mothers pulling them away with wary glances, their whispers trailing like smoke. He stayed up past midnight, his candles' glow seeping under his door, casting flickering shadows that seemed to dance to the music box's tune, their shapes twisting into figures that weren't human, tall, jerky, their heads tilting at angles that defied bone and sinew. Anna found sketches under his bed, grotesque figures with hollow eyes, stages wreathed in flames, puppets with jagged smiles and limbs twisted into impossible angles, their hands reaching out as if to pull her in, their faces alive with hunger. The walls of his room were scarred with pencil marks, masked figures dancing in circles, their faces cracked like shattered porcelain, their eyes black pits that seemed to watch her, their outlines bleeding into the plaster as if trying to escape. "Who taught you to draw these?" she asked, her voice shaking as she held up a sketch of Pierrot, its face split by a grin that seemed to bleed ink, its eyes dripping with something dark, its hands holding a burning script. "Lucien, answer me. Where are you getting these ideas?" "Pierrot," he whispered, his voice flat, his eyes fixed on the air beside her, as if seeing something she couldn't, his hands twitching as if pulling strings. "He shows me things. The theater. The fire. The audience. They're waiting, Mama, clapping, screaming, burning." Anna burned the drawings in the fireplace, the paper curling into ash, the smoke stinging her eyes, its acrid scent clinging to her hair, its curls forming shapes that mimicked the sketches, faces, claws, a smile too wide. But the next day, new ones appeared, taped to mirrors, tucked in drawers, slipped under her pillow, their lines sharper, their figures more vivid, as if drawn by a hand more skilled than Lucien's. One showed her own face, eyes sewn shut with black thread, her mouth a stitched smile, her hands holding a burning puppet, its strings wrapped around her wrists. Her hands trembled as she burned it, the flames doing little to warm the chill in her bones, the smoke curling into the air like a warning. One night, she woke to footsteps in the hall, slow and deliberate, like a metronome keeping time with her pulse, their rhythm too precise for a child. Lucien stood there, eyes blank, a pencil clutched in his fist like a dagger, its tip worn to a nub, its wood splintered from pressure. Behind him, the music box played, its tune a dirge that seemed to pulse with the house's heartbeat, each note a hammer on her nerves, its rhythm syncing with the shadows moving in the corners, tall, jerky, their outlines wrong, their heads tilting at angles that broke the laws of flesh. His skin was pale, almost translucent, his eyes sunken, ringed with shadows that seemed to writhe, their edges blurring into the dark. "Lucien, go to bed," Anna said, her voice shaking, her lantern casting his face in stark relief, its light flickering as if afraid. "Please, sweetheart, you're scaring me." He smiled, slow and wrong, his teeth glinting in the candlelight, his eyes reflecting nothing but the dark. "The show's starting soon, Mama," he said, his voice a whisper that carried the weight of a scream, its tone layered with another, deeper, colder. "Pierrot says I'm the star. The audience is coming, clapping, waiting." She grabbed his arm, pulling him to his room, but he felt heavy, resistant, as if something else held him, its grip stronger than hers, its presence a weight in the air. The music box's tune followed them, growing louder, the notes twisting into a scream that echoed in her skull, its rhythm a chain tightening around her heart. Anna locked Lucien's door, her hands shaking, and sat against it, listening to his murmurs through the wood, her lantern flickering, its light barely holding back the dark. "The stage is ready," he whispered, his voice a chant, its words slithering through the cracks. "The curtains are rising. The lights are burning. The audience is here. Chapter 6, The Children Who Vanish. The village was gripped by terror, its streets hushed, its people moving like ghosts through the fog, their faces pale, their eyes hollow. Elise, a girl of 8 with braids and a gap-toothed smile, had vanished 3 days ago, her absence a wound in Rochefort's heart, her mother's wails echoing through the square. Anna overheard mothers in the bakery, their voices low and frantic, their hands clutching baskets like lifelines, their eyes red-rimmed with fear and grief. She was near the theater, one said, a woman named Clara, her voice breaking, her hands trembling as she dropped a loaf of bread. They found her shoes on the stage, burned, the soles melted, but the laces untouched, like a sacrifice. My God, what's happening to our children? Anna's heart sank, her mind flashing to Lucien's obsession with the theater, his murmurs about Pierrot and the stage, his eyes growing distant, his smile wrong. She hurried home, her boots slipping on the cobblestones, the fog curling around her like a noose, its tendrils cold as fingers, whispering her name. She found Lucien in his room, staring at the music box, his fingers tracing its carvings, his eyes distant, almost vacant, his skin pale as bone, his breath shallow. Have you been to the theater? She demanded, grabbing his arm, her nails digging into his skin, her voice raw with panic, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. He didn't flinch, his gaze fixed on the puppet, its glass eyes glinting in the candlelight. Pierrot says it's almost time, he said, his voice a monotone, his lips barely moving, his words heavy with a weight that wasn't his. The audience is waiting. They want to see me shine. That night, another child disappeared, Tomas, a boy of 7, last seen chasing a stray cat toward the theater's ruins, his laughter swallowed by the fog, his mother's screams piercing the night. The village priest, Father Marcel, blessed the streets, his voice trembling as he sprinkled holy water, his cassock damp with fog and sweat, his hands shaking as he clutched his rosary, its beads clicking like bones. The villagers gathered, their faces pale, whispering of curses and ghosts, their eyes darting to the theater's ruins, its charred beams glowing faintly in the fog, as if alive. It's waking up, an old woman muttered, her hands clutching a shawl, her eyes sunken, her voice a hiss. It's hungry again, like before. Anna locked the manor's doors, barring the windows with planks she found in the cellar, her hands bleeding from splinters, her arms aching from the effort. But the music box played, its tune seeping through the walls like poison, finding cracks she couldn't see, its notes curling into her thoughts, twisting them into knots of fear. She found it in the parlor, its lid open, Pierrot's eyes glinting in the candlelight, their gaze heavy with intent. She'd hidden it in the cellar, behind a stack of crates, locked in a tin box, its key buried in the garden. Yet there it was, mocking her, its tune a siren's call that made her skin crawl, its notes a blade in her mind. Lucien, where are you getting this? She demanded, holding the box aloft, her voice raw with fear, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it, her eyes burning with tears. He shrugged, his face pale as bone, his eyes reflecting the puppet's glassy stare, his smile a faint echo of its jagged grin. Pierrot brings it back, he said, his voice flat, his hands twitching as if pulling strings. He needs it for the show. He needs me. Chapter 7, The Door That Closes. The house turned against Anna, becoming a labyrinth of malice, its walls closing in with every breath, its air thick with a hunger she couldn't name. Shadows moved in her peripheral vision, tall, jerky figures that vanished when she turned, their outlines lingering in mirrors like afterimages of a nightmare, their faces cracked and eyeless, their hands reaching through the glass. Doors slammed shut without touch, their hinges screeching like wounded animals, the sound echoing through the manor's hollow halls, shaking the walls. The music box appeared in impossible places, the kitchen counter, the staircase, Lucien's pillow, its tune playing unbidden, a mockery of music that made her skin crawl, each note a needle in her spine, twisting deeper with every loop, its rhythm a chain tightening around her heart. "Lucien, where are you getting this?" Anna demanded one morning, her voice raw from sleepless nights, her hands clutching the box so tightly her knuckles whitened, her nails biting into her palms, her eyes burning with exhaustion and fear. "This isn't a game. Tell me the truth." He stared through her, his eyes glassy, his lips twitching into a half-smile that wasn't his face pale as bone, his skin almost translucent. "Pierrot brings it back," he said, his voice a whisper that carried the weight of a scream, its tone layered with another, deeper, colder. "He's stronger than you, Mama. He's stronger than everyone. He always gets what he wants." Anna smashed the box with a hammer, its wood splintering, the puppet's head cracking like an egg, its glass eyes rolling across the floor, their gaze still fixed on her. Lucien screamed, a high, keening wail that didn't sound human, clawing at her hands, his nails drawing blood, his eyes wild with something not his own, his voice breaking as he sobbed. "He needs it," he cried, tears streaking his face, his hands trembling as he tried to gather the pieces. "You're ruining everything. The show can't start without it. He'll be angry." She locked the pieces in a tin box, burying it in the garden under a pile of stones, her hands trembling as she dug, the earth cold and unyielding, its dirt clinging to her skin like ash. That night, she woke to the tune again, louder, angrier, coming from the kitchen, its notes ablaze in her mind, cutting through her thoughts. The tin box sat on the table, unopened, its lock intact, yet the music played, its rhythm a pulse that shook the walls. Anna found scratches on her bedroom door, too high for Lucien to reach, deep enough to splinter the wood, forming symbols, circles, spirals, a face with no eyes, its mouth a jagged grin. In the mirror, a shadow loomed behind her, a figure with a cracked porcelain face, its smile splitting wider, its eyes black as voids, its hands reaching through the glass, their fingers brushing her reflection's throat. "Lucien," she screamed, running to his room, her lantern flickering as if afraid, its light barely holding back the dark. He was gone, his bed empty, the window open, the fog curling inside like a predator's breath, its tendrils pooling on the floor. The music box sat on his pillow, whole again, its tune pulsing like a heartbeat, Pierrot's eyes staring at the ceiling, its smile a promise of pain, its ruffled collar stained with fresh blood. Chapter 8, Memories of the Flame. Desperate, Anna sought answers, her heart pounding as she ran through the fog to a shack near the theater's ruins, her boots slipping on the cobblestones, her coat heavy with rain. An old man named Amos lived there, his eyes clouded with blindness, his hands gnarled as roots, trembling as he clutched a cane carved with strange symbols, spirals and eyes that matched the scratches on her door, their lines glowing faintly in the dark. His shack smelled of damp wood and incense, its walls lined with shelves of dusty books and jars filled with things Anna didn't want to name, bones, feathers, something that moved in the shadows. "You're in the cursed house," he said, his voice a rasp, barely audible over the wind howling outside, its wail a chorus of the damned. "Built from the theater's bones. You shouldn't have come to Rochefort, woman." "Tell me about the fire," Anna said, her breath visible in the cold, her hands clenched to hide their shaking, her coat damp with fog and sweat, her voice raw with desperation. "I need to know what's happening to my son. Please, help me." Amos's face tightened, his blind eyes fixed on nothing, his lips trembling, his hands gripping his cane so tightly it creaked. The troop was unnatural, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, as if afraid the walls would hear, his words heavy with a fear older than him. Puppets moved without strings, their eyes alive, watching you back, seeing into your soul. The last show was for children only, no adults allowed. They called it the final act. The theater was packed, the children laughing, clapping, their voices bright. Then the fire came, during the finale, swallowing the stage, the seats, everything. Men, women, children, all burned. The screams lasted hours, they said, even after the flames died, echoing in the valley. All were found, charred to bone, except one puppet. Pierrot, the star. Anna's blood ran cold, her pulse hammering in her ears, her vision blurring as the room seemed to tilt. What was it? She asked, her voice barely audible, her hands gripping the edge of his table, her nails digging into the wood, her heart a frantic drumbeat. A vessel, Amos whispered, his voice a hiss, his hands trembling so badly his cane clattered to the floor, its cymbals glinting in the candlelight. For something older than Rochefort, older than the valley, older than the church's bells. Something that feeds on innocence, on dreams, on the spark of a child's soul. It was never found, but it never left. It waits in the theater, in the fog, in the things children love. It's awake now, because of you, because of your boy. She ran home, her mind racing, the fog clawing at her heels, its tendrils cold as fingers, whispering her name, their voices a chorus of children's laughter, twisted and wrong. The theater's ruins glowed faintly across the street, as if mocking her, its windows pulsing with a sickly yellow light, its beams creaking like bones. Lucien was back in his room, sitting on his bed, the music box in his lap, its tune a low, pulsing dirge, like a heartbeat from the grave, its notes shaking the walls. "Where were you?" Anna demanded, her voice breaking, her hands shaking as she grabbed his shoulders, her eyes searching his for any sign of her son. He looked up, his eyes empty, his face pale as bone, his smile a faint echo of the puppet's jagged grin. "Pierrot needed me," he said, his voice flat, his hands twitching as if pulling strings. "The stage is almost ready. The audience is coming, Mama. They're already here." Chapter 9, the theater reopens. A storm rolled in, rain hammering the manor like fists, the wind howling through cracks in the walls, rattling the windows like a beast demanding entry, its wail a chorus of the damned. Across the street, the theater glowed, its windows pulsing with sickly yellow light, like the eyes of a creature waking from a long slumber, its beams creaking like bones, its walls groaning like a living thing. Music swelled, violins shrieking, drums pounding, a chorus of wails that seemed to rise from the earth itself, shaking the manor's foundations, vibrating in Anna's bones, its rhythm a pulse that matched her heartbeat. She looked out her window and saw Lucien, dressed in a tattered clown costume, its ruffles stained with soot and something darker, his face painted white, his lips red as blood, his eyes blank as a doll's, his movements jerky, as if pulled by invisible strings. He walked toward the theater, his steps mechanical, the fog curling around him like a lover, whispering his name, its tendrils pooling at his feet like blood. "Lucien!" she screamed, chasing him through the rain, her boots slipping on the cobblestones, her coat heavy with water, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. The theater doors opened, swallowing him whole, slamming shut with a boom that echoed in her chest, shaking the ground, its sound a thunderclap that silenced the storm for a heartbeat. She stumbled to the doors, her fists hammering against them, her voice raw with anguish, her screams drowned by the wind, the rain, the music, its notes ablaze in her ears. Laughter pierced the chaos, not Lucien's, but sharp, like shattering glass, Pierrot's, cutting through the air like a knife, slicing into her mind, its voice a chorus of madness. She found a broken window, its glass shards glinting like teeth in the lightning's flash, their edges jagged, dripping with rain and blood. She climbed through, glass cutting her palms, her hands, blood mixing with blood, the water, dripping onto the floor below, the scent sharp and metallic, mingling with the stench of decay. The air inside the theater was thick with the reek of ash and rot, a sweet, cloying scent that clung to her throat, making her gag, the floor slick with something dark and warm, pooling around her boots, seeping into her soles. The stage was a cavern of shadow and light, its curtains fluttering as if breathing, their velvet heavy with soot and blood, their edges frayed like torn flesh, pulsing with a rhythm she couldn't see. Lucien stood center stage, bowing to an unseen audience, his painted smile too wide, his movements jerky, like a puppet on strings, his eyes locked on something beyond the curtain, something that made him laugh, a low, hollow sound that wasn't his. "Lucien, come back to me," Anna cried, her voice breaking, her hands outstretched as she stumbled through the aisle, her boots slipping on the slick floor, her heart a frantic drumbeat, her tears mixing with the blood on her hands. "Please, you're my son." He turned, his eyes empty, pupils swallowing the hazel, his smile fixed, a grotesque mask of paint and pain. "The show must go on, Mama," he said, his voice not his own, layered with something older, a chorus of whispers that slithered from the shadows, their words weaving into her thoughts like thorns. "Pierrot needs me. The audience is waiting." Chapter 10, The Soulless Dancers. The theater pulsed with a malevolent life, its air thick with the stench of charred wood and rotting flesh, a miasma that clung to Anna's skin, seeping into her pores, choking her lungs. The walls groaned, their timbers splintering as if in agony, the ceiling dripping with black ichor that pooled on the floor, hissing like acid. Puppets emerged from the shadows, life-sized and grotesque, their porcelain bodies cracked like shattered bones, their limbs jerking in unnatural spasms, as if animated by a will that despised their form. Their faces were masks of horror, smudged paint, jagged stitches, eyeless sockets weeping with something viscous and black, yet their glass mouths moved, grinning, whispering, their voices a cacophony of children's cries, twisted into laughter. They swung from the rafters on invisible chains, their wooden hands clawing the air, their fingers snapping like dry twigs, their heads twisting to impossible angles, tracking Anna's every step. In the auditorium, rows of children sat, their bodies still as death, their skin gray as ash, eyes sewn shut with black thread, mouths stitched into grim smiles, hands folded like dolls arranged for a funeral. Elise was there, her braids unraveling into frayed ropes, her lips sealed, her fingers clutching a burned locket, its clasp melted. Tomas sat beside her, his head slumped, his eyes hollow, a single burned shoe at his feet, its laces pristine, a cruel mockery of the fire that took him. Other children filled the seats, their faces unfamiliar yet haunting, their presence a silent scream that pressed against Anna's skull. "Lucien, look at me." Anna screamed, her voice raw, tearing through the puppet's wails, her body trembling as she forced her way through their thrashing limbs. Their claws snagged her coat, ripping it to shreds, their wooden fingers raking her skin, leaving welts that burned like fire, blood seeping through her sleeves. She slipped on the ichor-slicked floor, her hands plunging into a pool that pulsed with a heartbeat, its warmth sickening, its surface rippling with visions, flames, his screams, her husband's face, his body in the river, Lucien's eyes turning black. A voice erupted, high and splintered, like a choir of shattered instruments, shaking the theater to its core. loosening beams that creaked above. "Welcome, Anna," it boomed, its laughter a blade that carved into her mind, its words dripping with glee. The final act begins. Pierrot descended from the rafters, no longer a mere puppet but a towering monstrosity, its form a grotesque fusion of porcelain and flesh, its face a cracked mask stretched over a void, its smile a wound that split from ear to jaw, weeping crimson. Its limbs were too long, too many, writhing like serpents, its body twitching as if torn by unseen forces, its eyes, black, endless pits that seemed to swallow light, pulling Anna's gaze into their depths, promising oblivion. "Lucien is my star," it hissed, its voice a chorus of screams, layered with the agony of countless children, their voices trapped in its throat, clawing for release. 7 souls to rend the veil. 1 more to anchor me in flesh. Anna's knees buckled, her breath a ragged sob, her hands clenching into fists to keep from collapsing, her nails digging into her palms, grounding her in pain. "You're not taking my son," she roared, her voice a mother's fury, raw and unyielding, her eyes blazing with defiance, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the blood on her hands. "He's mine." Pierrot's laughter filled the theater, a sound like breaking bones, shaking the walls, sending cracked spiderwebbing across the ceiling, dust raining down like ash. "You're too late," it said, its head tilting at an angle that snapped, its smile tearing wider, revealing rows of jagged teeth, black and glistening. The stage is set. The audience demands his blood. Join him, Anna, or watch him burn. The puppets surged, their movements frenzied, their claws slashing, their faces splintering into shards that hovered in the air, reforming into smaller, vicious Pierrots that darted toward her, their giggles a high-pitched scream. Anna fought, her arms swinging wildly, her hands grasping at their strings, shadowy, intangible threads that burned her skin like ice, searing her flesh as she yanked, shattering their forms. She reached the stage, her breath coming in gasps, her body battered, Lucien's name a prayer on her lips. He stood motionless, his clown costume smoldering, wisps of smoke from his skin, his painted face a mask, his eyes locked on Pierrot, as if entranced by its spellbinding gaze. Chapter 11, The Witch's True Face. The stage was a living nightmare, its boards writhing like flesh, sprouting thorns that pierced Anna's boots, blood seeping from the wounds, feeding into the floor's pulsing veins. The curtains bled, their velvet dissolving into a curtain of crimson that cascaded over the stage, pooling around Lucien, its surface alive with faces, children, screaming children's faces, their mouths opening and closing, their eyes pleading, their hands clawing at the air. The puppets were relentless, their forms multiplying, their shattered faces reforming, each one a mirror of Pierrot's, their eyes glowing with a malevolent light, a hunger that burned brighter with every step Anna took. They chanted, their voices a discordant hymn, the show must rise, their words weaving into a spell, tightening around her mind, pulling at her will, urging her to kneel, to watch, to join. Lucien's eyes flickered, his chant faltering, his voice breaking through the haze. "Mama, it hurts," he sobbed, tears cutting through the paint, his body shaking, his hands clutching his head, as if trying to tear out the voice inside. "He's in me, Mama. I can't make him stop." Anna's heart shattered, her voice a raw scream, "Hold on, Lucien," as she dodged a puppet's lunge, its claws raking her back, the pain a white-hot agony that fueled her rage. She spotted the music box, teetering on the stage's edge, its glass prison, its tune a deafening now, a heartbeat that shook the theater, its crystal notes splintering to the air like shards of ice. Pierrot's gaze snapped to it, her form flickering, its smile twisting into a snarl, its voice a thunderclap that split the rafters. "Asterisk, don't touch it," asterisk, it roared, its voice splitting into 1,000 screams, its body lunging, a mass of writhing limbs, its hands clawing the air, tearing gouges into the stage, its eyes blazing with a fury that wasn't human, wasn't earthly. The curtain will rise. Anna dove, her hands closing around the box, its glass prison burning her skin, its tune of physical force that pushed against her chest, trying to crush her lungs. The puppets swarmed, their claws tearing at her arms, her legs, her face, their faces splitting into shards that rained down like knives, reforming into smaller pierrots that burrowed into her skin, their giggles a scream inside her. She staggered, blood streaming from her wounds, her vision blurring, but Lucien's sobs kept her anchored, his voice a beacon in the chaos. "Mama, I'm scared. I'm here," she screamed, clutching the box, her hands slipping, her body trembling with pain, her mind fraying under the weight of Pierrot's gaze. The creature loomed over her, its shadow a tide that drowned the stage, its smile a wound that devoured light, its eyes pulling at her soul, promising rest, oblivion, if she'd only let go. "He's mine," Pierrot snarled, its voice a venom that seeped into her thoughts, twisting her will. "His blood will open the veil. His soul will make me flesh. You cannot stop the final act." Anna's knees buckled, her body screaming, her mind screaming louder, but Lucien's face, his real face, beneath the paint, her boy, her son, gave her strength. She raised the music box, her hands trembling, her voice a broken whisper, "You'll never have him." Chapter 12, The Curse of the Theater. The stage was hell, its air a poison, its light a blade, its sound a scream that never stopped. Pierrot's form was unraveling, its porcelain flesh melting into a writhing mass of shadows, tendrils lashing out, wrapping around Lucien's limbs, pulling him upward, his body dangling like a marionette, his screams piercing the air, his eyes wide with terror. The puppets were a storm, their forms dissolving into a swarm of shards, their eyes glowing like embers, their voices a chant that tore at Anna's mind, blood for the curtain, soul for the witch. Anna clutched the journal she'd found backstage, its pages crumbling under her bloodied fingers, its words burning into her soul. It was Claude's, the theater's director, a man who'd sold his soul to bind a spirit to Pierrot, a puppet crafted from bone and blood, not wood, its essence a shard of something ancient, something that hungered for life. The ritual demanded 7 children's souls to tear the veil between worlds, to give the spirit flesh, to let it walk among the living. Lucien was the final piece, his blood the key, his soul the fuel, his life the price for Pierrot's rebirth. "Fight it, Lucien!" Anna screamed, her voice raw, her body shaking as she dodged a tendril that lashed out, its touch burning like acid, searing her skin, leaving welts that pulsed with pain. "You're stronger than this. You're my son, my heart." Lucien's sobs broke through, his voice faint, trembling, "I can't, Mama. He's in my head, showing me the fire, the screams, the audience burning. He says I have to finish it, or it'll never stop." Pierrot's laughter was a tidal wave, drowning the theater, shaking the walls, sending beams crashing down, their splinters raining like shrapnel. Asterisk perform, asterisk, it roared, its voice a chorus of the damned, its tendrils tightening, drawing blood from his Lucien's wrists, his ankles, his neck, dripping onto the stage, feeding the void that yawned beneath the boards, its hunger a living thing. Blood for the veil. Soul for the flesh. Anna's eyes burned with tears, her body racked with pain, but her love for Lucien was a fire that burned hotter than Pierrot's curse. She staggered to the music box, its glass prison a beacon in the dark, its tune a chain that bound the spirit. Pierrot's tendrils lashed out, wrapping around her wrists, burning, pulling, but she fought, her screams, a primal fury, her hands clawing at the box, her glass prison, her fingers slipping on its glass surface, her blood making it slick. "You can't stop it," Pierrot hissed, its voice a venom that seeped into her soul, its eyes burning into hers, its smile a promise of eternity in torment. "The veil is torn. The stage is mine." Chapter 13, The Lead Actor. The theater was a vortex of horror, its stage a maw that hungered for blood, its air a scream that tore at Anna's soul. Pierrot's tendrils lifted Lucien higher, his body writhing, his screams a knife in her heart, his paint melting away, his face a mask of agony, his eyes locked on hers, pleading for salvation. The puppets were a legion, their shards reforming into a swarm, their eyes a blaze of light, their voices a chant that drowned out everything but Pierrot's laughter, the final act. Blood and soul. The stage's cracks widened, revealing a void beneath, a black, pulsing abyss of stars and screams, its edges alive with writhing souls, their hands reaching up, clawing for freedom, their faces those of the audience, children, trapped for centuries. Anna's body was a map of pain, her hands bleeding, her the burns throbbing, her lungs burning, but Lucien's voice, his sobs, his plea for her was her anchor, her. She raised the music box, its glass prison, its tune a scream now, its surface cracking under her grip, its glass prison shards cutting into her palms, her blood mixing with the ichor inside. Pierrot's eyes widened, its form convulsing, its tendrils thrashing, its voice a scream that shattered the rafters, asterisk and oh, asterisk. She smashed the box, prison against the stage, glass exploding, its glass shattering, the tune stopping mid-note, its silence a thunderclap that silenced the theater, its power broken. Pierrot's form collapsed, its shadows melting into ash, its screams a chorus of agony, its body writhing as the veil snapped shut, the void beneath the stage sealing with a crack like breaking bone. The puppets disintegrated, their shards dissolving into dust, their voices fading into silence, their eyes going dark. Lucien fell, his body crumpling, his sobs faint but real, his eyes clearing, his paint peeling away, revealing her his boy. But Pierrot's voice lingered, a whisper in the dark, "You've only burned the stage," it hissed, its ashes swirling, reforming into a faint outline, its eyes burning like embers. Another stage waits, another child. Always another. Anna dragged Lucien off the stage, her arms burning, her body screaming, her heart pounding as she stumbled through the collapsing theater, beams crashing, the walls caving, the air thick with ash. The audience's children faded, their souls dissolving into mist, their stitched faces opening eyes one last time, their mouths parting in silent thanks, their forms dissolving into light, freed at last. Chapter 14, The curtain falls silent. The theater imploded, its ruins swallowed by the storm, its screams drowned by thunder, its ash mixing with snow, the rain, the snow, the fog. The Anna carried Lucien through the woods, her body broken, her hands numb, his weight a lifeline, his breath a prayer. His clown costume was in tatters, his face streaked with blood and ash, but his eyes were his own, hazel and alive, his sobs faint but real. The village was silent, its streets empty, its houses turning away, as if shunning the theater's grave, its curse. Rochefort itself seemed to exhale, its fog thinning, but not gone, its tendrils lingering like ghosts, watching, waiting. They returned to the manor one last time, packing their cart in the dawn's gray light, the air cold and sharp, cutting through Anna's lungs. She burned the manor's sketches, their ashes rising into the sky, the pages curling into nothing, the music boxes' remains buried deep in the garden, the earth swallowing them like a secret, its seal a lie she clung to. They fled Rochefort, the fog chasing them to the horizon, its whispers fading but never silent, their promise a weight in her chest. In their new town, far from the valley's shadow, Anna rebuilt their life, stitch by stitch, her needle weaving dresses again, her hands steady but scarred, her heart fragile but fierce. Lucien's nightmares faded, his laughter returning, soft but growing, like a flower breaking through stone, his eyes bright with boyhood, though sometimes they lingered on the dark, searching for something he couldn't name. Anna watched him, her nights sleepless, her ears tuned to every sound, his breaths a shield against the past, her dreams haunted by a cracked smile, eyes that burned, a voice that whispered her name. Chapter 15, The Music Beyond the Veil. Winter came, its snow blanketing their new home, its silence a stark contrast to Rochefort's fog, its peace a fragile lie. Anna worked late, her candle burning low, her needle threading through silk, her hands steady despite the ache in her bones, the scars on her palms pulsing with memory. Lucien played, his drawings now of stars and ships, knights, dragons, knights, his laughter bright, his voice free of shadows, his eyes clear, his curls bouncing as he ran through the snow, his breath visible in the cold air. One morning, a parcel arrived, unmarked, its paper stained with rusty smudges, its weight uneven, as if something moved inside. Anna's heart stopped, her hands shaking as she tore it open, her breath catching, her screams silent in her throat. A music box lay within, its wood gleaming like obsidian, its carvings sharper, alive with malice, tents burning, trapezes snapping, faces screaming in the flames. Pierrot stood atop, its eyes larger, its smile cracked, its jaw unhinged, its ruffled collar dripping with blood, its hands raised as if conducting an orchestra of pain. The tune began, slow and deep, a dirge that shook the house, its notes a chain that wound through the walls, the floor, her soul, pulling at something deep inside. Lucien stood in the doorway, his face pale, his eyes wide, his hands twitching, his breath hitching as the music called, its melody curling into his mind, his body swaying, his voice a whisper. "Mama, the stage is calling," he said, his words not his own, his eyes clouding with ash. Anna grabbed the box, her hands burning, her hands searing as she hurled it into the fire, the flames roaring, the wood splintering, the tune screaming, Pierrot's laughter rising above it all, its voice a promise, a vow, the curtain never falls, it hissed, its eyes meeting hers through the flames, its smile burning into her soul. "The stage is eternal. I'll always be waiting." The fire died, the box reduced to ash, but the tune lingered, faint, in the wind outside, in the snow, in Lucien's hums, in Anna's dreams, its notes a chain that bound them, a curse that would never break, a stage that would always rise again, its audience forever waiting in the dark.